time a user loaded each page or went back to a previous page. So that would rack up fairly quickly. So it was like, all right, I can live with this. One of the fun things about this, we definitely have an app that is rife with React code written by not React developers. So there's lots of things that are just kind of goofy. So I don't know what's going on in the background here. If I move my mouse, it'll probably stop. It might be casting up here. But so take a look at the CPU graph. Mind you, this is a 2018 6-core MacBook Pro. So you know, pretty much everything on the web should be fairly smooth, right? So as I scroll, you will notice this really goofy, squishy interaction with this map. So it is fixed position to the bottom and then calculating its height on every scroll. So you can see that it's hitting a bunch of different cores, and you know, and like I said, this is on a brand new couple $1,000 computer. Imagine something running IE11 or something not this nice. You know, but I pretty much laid out like what our problem was here, right? We need to have one instance of this map. We need to share it across all the pages. I also want to do it in a way that's within React and not some like goofy passing data out of React to render to something in the DOM and whatnot. And so we were talking about it, and only one of my, Nate's on my team at Air Data. Dan did a bunch of this work. He's not here tonight, but some of you have met Dan Hannigan. So we were talking about it, and we had a big long conversation with a couple different people on Denver Devs that we were like, okay, so like, this is kind of what portals do, but backwards. So a portal in React lets you render something up outside of a component. So we use one in here, I don't remember where to show you a good example, but we essentially, like if you're not subscribed to this area, you would see a subscription button up here. Now the header is pretty dumb, doesn't know about your subscriptions, so instead of passing everything about the subscription into the header, we have another component elsewhere on the page that knows all of that, so we just wanted to bubble it up. So what a portal does is it lets you render something outside of the current component. The limitation of that is it has to be above it. So it's so it's like you have this page of the app, and then on a certain page you want to render something in the header. Sure, you could put a bunch of logic and whatnot in your header, but then if you want to do that on multiple pages, you end up with some goofy conditional rendering and whatnot. Not to mention, in your kind of componentized app, you've got things over here that don't have anything to do with the header and so on and so forth. So that's what a portal does. But we were looking for backwards of that, where we wanted to render something once at a high level point in the app. So essentially, the first time I go to render a map, I want to call the Google Maps API, create an instance of the Google Map, and then anytime I need a map going forward, I want to use that same instance of the map. This doesn't sound like it's that complex, but it was until we found a library that was everything I could have ever wanted, which I'll show you in a second. Yeah, so here's the new implementation that doesn't look very much different. One thing that all of us with a visual eye just wigged out about constantly is that depending on the width of this screen, the padding on the left side of the map gets a little inconsistent from the top of it, and it gets worse on bigger screens, and it just made us twitch every time we looked at it. So this is a new branch that we're working on, and map moves, map sticks at the top, but you can see that my CPU graph doesn't really do a whole lot, and you can see that this whole scrolling is buttery smooth instead of the chop that we get over here. So this library it's really funny. We're through this conversation. Let's see. So we were like, God, it'd be really amazing if somebody came up with a way to do a reverse portal. And then I Googled it. Yup, thank you, random stranger on GitHub doing my job. So this is really cool. This is really new. Like, this was first published. There's 23 commits in the repo. Let me see what the first one was. August 23rd, so, you know, nice and production stable. I rationalized it by going, am I gonna write anything that's better though? So, you know, Yeah, but this is actually really cool, and I'm gonna give this guy's product a shout out because I love what he came up with here. So he built this as part of HTTP Toolkit, which I haven't messed with, but an API that might be hard to actually make happen, like errors and whatnot. So yeah, that's pretty cool. HTTP Toolkit.tech. But yeah, so his examples, there's one that is perfect. Let me see which one it is. Yeah, it's this one of a video. So you can play this video and move it in and outside of itself. Video keeps playing. There's no like interruption, and it keeps playing. It's moving around. It's not restarting it. I looked at this and I was like, wow, I've never had the solution to a problem be like this silver platter for me. So the code is a little bit contrived, but it is kind of a goofy concept. So what happens is there's a function from the library that creates a portal node, which is where, and by the way, a bunch of us are video game nerds, so Dan and I had a joke one day of like, we should not turn this into a drinking game of somebody take a drink every time we say the word portal, because we'll never get home. But yeah, so what happens here is you render it initially in this.
Make the text bigger?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Thanks.
No problem. Is that good enough?
Yeah.
Or more?
Much better.
You good? Okay, cool. So you've got an in portal and you've got an out portal. So the in portal is where you actually render the contents that you want to display elsewhere. So that's just this in portal component. It takes this node that was created up here, and so then it's rendered into this portal. And so this gets rendered and it just like ephemerally exists somewhere in the context of your app. And it doesn't get rendered until the first time you render an out portal. And then once you render an out portal after that, you are sharing the same instance of this element that you had before. So with this example of a video, it's the same video. It keeps playing. If it was a movie, you would continue having the audio. Like everything would just work. It's just moving around in the DOM, which is like, how do we even do that? It's kind of crazy. So that's what they did here. And so, yeah, so now, what's really nice, I'll actually look in the markup of this for you real quick, just to show you what makes me cry. I don't need this anymore. Yeah, so you can see that on the page here, there's this map container, but then the rest of the page is its own thing. And so, we've got kind of a goofy flexbox layout in here that makes room for this map, and it doesn't always size quite properly. Where over here on the new version, we've got our page contents, we've got a wrapper around the page, we've got a couple different kind of elements in the layout here. We've got a left column and we've got a map container. So then within the map container, there's a element with an ID of map, which is right here, and that's where the map actually gets rendered. So in the component, we have, let's see, is this the right? I will make this bigger before anyone tells me to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I always forget. Page overview. Where's my map at? Yeah, so now we just have this component called map layout container, and it takes in two things. It takes in a page, which is just a string of which page in our app you're on that we use for analytics and rendering things and whatnot. And then it also takes in this portal node. This was one of the weirdest things about using this that was hard to kind of wrap your head around is, okay, in the example over here, there's there's not a lot of code to it, right? It's like 20 lines, render it up here, show it down here, but you need to have access to the same portal node instance all throughout the app. So I'm actually probably gonna make a pull request for Hacktoberfest for this, but what we ended up doing was just making a quick little context. Let's see, where's this at? As I fumble my way through my day job, not at my day job. I can't remember. Where did I put that? Nate, do you remember where I put that? Or did you know? Oh, you didn't really work on this much. Right? Okay. Here, give me 1 sec to look for
Pull request history.
Yeah. Good code review Dan's code.
Yeah, somebody was right. Just go look at your freaking GitHub history. Let's see, map, hold on. I know I put together a context in here somewhere, and I just don't remember where I did it. Map context. All right, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So we just threw together a quick context with hooks. So there's a map provider that we put all the way up at the top of the app. We create a portal node, we host it on that, and then anywhere that we use either the out portal or the in portal, we can just grab this context to grab the portal node off of it. So there's a hook for getting it that's just use map that gives you that. And then also, since we do still have a bunch of components that are classes, quick little context consumer higher order component. So then when we go to use it, just on our component, we do with map context, and then we have access to a prop called map context that then contains a portal node, and that lets us kind of reference this all over the app. So yeah, it was something that's been bothering me for a year, and I'm glad I waited this long to try to tackle it because it made it way easier than it should have been. But yeah, that was just a quick demo of that. Do you have any questions? Probably not. It's probably still spinning. Oh yeah, in the back. Yeah.
Would Google get upset if they knew about this? Like, is it against their
To use their API well? No, I mean, we've been doing. I don't think it's really that big of a deal. His question was, would Google be upset if they saw you're doing this? And while we might have a decent Google Maps API bill, it probably looks like a joke compared to something like Uber. So, you think you're big until you realize you're small. So yeah, I doubt it's an issue. So cool. Thanks everybody.
Who was that?
Ask that question. Oh. Uh-oh.
I was just gonna say, if AirDNA folds next week, then yeah, we'll be coming for you.
Blame this NPM package.
Okay, we are cutting out or losing connection or
I
something.
think you're just talking too close to it and it's
am I?
clipping.
I'm just breathing right into the mic here.
Mic breather.
So I have a quick talk. It's much quicker than Kevin's, so if you're getting tired, don't worry about it. I'll just run through it here real quick.
I ramble a lot, like Nate will tell you.
Not so much of a lightning talk, but we're pretty casual about it. So if anybody ever wants to give a lightning talk in the future, we're not gonna swing the hammer on you if you go over time. And we are trying to do them at least once every 6 months. So just to kind of give an opportunity to give a shorter, more casual talk if you don't want to commit to something longer. But I just wanted to speak real quickly about 2 things that I've been using at work that I found to be really useful. Let me check my computer real quick here to make sure it doesn't go to sleep. It's been acting really strange. But the first one being GetCherryPick, and I don't know if you've used GetCherryPick before, but it's something I've heard a lot about and hadn't used up until probably the last 6 months or so. It's really useful if you want to pull a commit from another branch onto your branch without having to merge or rebase, which is typically what I had done previously. So just real quick, how to do it, or kind of visualizing here because I'm definitely a visual learner. Say for example, we have our master branch, and at my job we have many different feature branches, and we kind of run with sort of a hybrid Git flow where we have a development branch and then move that back and forth to a master branch. And what I've often found is that there's code sitting on a branch that I need, that maybe I've merged previously, that I want in a branch. For whatever reason I don't have it. Maybe I branched off later than I needed to, or who knows, contrived examples here. Say I want this commit here, this 48v9ce0. That's just a shortened version of that Git hash. If I want that on my feature branch, what's nice about this is I can pull that singular commit onto my branch without getting everything else that's currently on the branch. And to do that, I would just have to check out the feature branch I'm on and actually run GetCherryPick. And this is a mistake actually, because there should be a hyphen between the cherry and the pick. So this is a slide I wrote like 6 months ago when we were going to do our last lightning talk, and I didn't even notice it when I was reviewing here today. So don't do it this way. Put a hyphen in between the cherry and the pick, but it's one word, I guess. It's just how Git matches on the keyword, I suppose. And then you just put the shortened version of the hash. You can put the full hash if you want. That works as well. But just run a git log and identify the commit you want, and then run GetCherryPick, and you'll have it. So our new example, we just took that E commit, and now we've applied it to the feature branch. That's the first useful thing. The second useful thing I've used recently is conditional object properties with spread. And some of you may already use these things, I don't know, but I found it really useful, especially for like building up a request object in an API where you might be updating attributes on, or properties on a model, and if you just wanted to take wholesale every field on the model that you receive in the endpoint, then you need to conditionally apply them. So it depends on how your API is set up, but for example here, I am basically looking at this updated age on line 3. That is just a Boolean, true or false. And so what I'm saying is, if the user updated the age, or if I updated age in this case, if that evaluates to true, what that's going to do is conditionally apply, using the spread operator, that age colon values.age. If I didn't update the age, then it's just not even going to be there. And I found that really handy. I've used it numerous times since. It really just depends on what you're doing in your API, but I have one more example here of that. This is one that we've actually used at my job, where we're looking to see if someone has updated their social security number, and if they haven't updated it, then we're not going to send that over the wire. Not that it's a big deal either way in our case, but yeah, we're just evaluating using the not equals, that operator, to see if it's changed or not, and if it hasn't, then it's not going in the request. So those are 2 things that I found really useful that I've been using in the last 6 months, and I used GetCherryPick yesterday, in fact. I'm always amazed at how slick that is. So yeah, that's it. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
So when you do GetCherryPick, does it also take the changes in the commits that are like in that bridge? So like for your set, like C and D weren't in there, so it gets all of that and pulls it all over?
No, it does not, and thank you for asking that, because I'm realizing I totally glazed over that. No, it just pulls that one commit. It doesn't take anything before it. So everything in that commit, you may have things in that commit that perhaps you don't want, depending on what the commit is, but it's going to take everything from that one commit and apply it. And another important note is that when it applies that new commit to wherever you're sending it, it's going to have a different hash than it did in the source branch. So it's as far as how Git sees it, it's an entirely new commit, just with the same changes.
So does that then it has a pretty big chance that the stuff that's in that cherry-picked branch is dependent upon the previous two commits? It can break a bunch of shit?
It can definitely break
Okay,
things.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be, cautious about what you're pulling over. But it just depends. Yeah, and in some cases, rebase might be smarter, or just doing a merge. But I've been in situations. A range.
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't done that, but that sounds like it'd be really useful. Yeah, especially if you have like 3 or 4. Yeah. Okay. So you can do ranges as well. Dewey.
Just curious if you've had any issues merging back in after you've done cherry pick. I know that years ago I had some guys try that,
Yeah.
and it caused all kinds of problems. And there was a blog post that talked about being able to use Git checkout to do what cherry pick does.
Okay.
I don't remember the site for that blog post. I have to find it, but there was actually someone wrote up how to do it with just Git checkout, and it was a much cleaner.
Really? I haven't heard of that. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, I have had issues with it occasionally. You just have to be cautious about it. Depends on what you're pulling in. I mean, yeah, it just depends.
Has it caused any merge conflicts when you go to merge back into the branch that had what you pulled from?
I think it will throw merge conflicts depending, like if it's something that already has changes, it can do that, but normally it does a pretty good job of I mean, it's like any other Git merge, it'll try to fit it in where it can. But any other questions? Nope. Cool, well why don't we take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and Patrick is going to give the final talk of the evening. So, thanks.
I have never seen conditional spread before.
Have you not?
No.
I know. Well, see,
That's super cool.
it's one of those things that, like, when I first found it, I was like, this feels kind of obvious. I should know this. And then, but I just didn't. And the more and more I talked to people about it, they were saying the same thing. They're like, I've never seen that before.
So once you see it, you're like, well, of course that would work.
Yeah.
But until you try it, you're like, why the fuck would you do that?
Yeah. Let's go.
Oh, no, you're good.
I was just teasing.
No, I relate that had to work like that, especially in creative. Really expensive.
Hey, Sam. I'm Kara.
Hey, Kara. Sorry.
Sorry, I called you at a bad moment.
No worries.
I messaged you on LinkedIn. I'm with Austin Fazer. We definitely want to sponsor one of these in the future. So I just had to come to one of them to check that off
Yeah,
the
thanks
list.
for joining us.
Yeah, for sure.
To be honest with you, I couldn't remember. We get so many
Dude,
requests.
I totally understand. It is all good. Do you need one for December still?
So we gotta have somebody lined up right now, but they're really flexible.
Okay.
So, if you wanted, if you really had your heart set on November, we could make it work. But we have openings beyond that too.
Okay, you could consider me backup for November, and then I can lock in another one in the future.
Okay, cool. That'd be great. What's the best way? Is over LinkedIn? Is that the best way?
Yeah, that works. I can give you my email address too, and we can talk that way.
Sure, I'll remember and I'll send you a message here in the next
Cool,
couple
or if
days.
not, I can send one too. Do you guys always do it in this space? Because that's one other thing we do, we host them in our own space too. But this seems pretty locked down.
Yeah. In fact, I think I spoke with somebody else. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I told her I was coming in. She's like, yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. You'll have to tell her hi for me.
Yeah, for sure.
But she mentioned the same thing at one point. But this works out so well for
Okay,
us.
yeah, no, I totally understand. There's just so many people there. It's really cool to come to.
Yeah,
I've been to like a ton of meetups and seen like the full range of it.
Have you? Yeah.
Yeah.
It fluctuates a lot. Like some months.
Are you on the Denver decks?
Yeah.
Nice, well, great to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
As far as you know, does Google have any sort of like terms and conditions that would like get butthurt about something like that? Like every page you need to re-hit their API, like I doubt it.
Are you guys paying for it?
Oh yeah, like tens of thousands of dollars.
Are you paying it based upon how many times it's hit though?
Yeah.
It's one of the cornerstones of the web, so.
Yeah. Well, and we use a bunch of server-side geocoding stuff actually.
Don't do that. I hate that. There you go.
Alright, let's get things back going here. I think there's more soft drinks, but we are all out of food. I guess I didn't order enough this week, but glad you guys all came hungry. Alright, well, we're going to get to the final talk of the evening, so just want to thank Patrick here. He stepped in and we needed a speaker, and we're always looking for speakers, so if that's something you're interested in, please come talk to me. But really excited to hear some more about hooks. If you haven't been following all the developments on hooks, then I don't know what hole you've been living in, but Patrick's going to fill us in here. So everybody, please give Patrick a round of applause. Welcome.
All right, well, thank you once again. Like I said, my name is Patrick. I just graduated actually a few months ago from actually this school here, touring from the finance program. Thank you very much for my classmates and my old classmates for showing up. Real appreciate it. And yes, we'll talk a little bit about React hooks, how to use them, what they are, and actually how to completely replace Redux. Yeah, so reason to use classes. Before with React, we use classes whenever we want to have something for like holding on something in state, right? Whether this is something that we have kind of gotten used to. Or say we want to use like lifecycle methods to make sure something's updated. It's all really about like kind of keeping something in sync with each other, right? So, now with React hooks, it's actually something that was introduced earlier this year. Like I said, it's something that has been very recent. I'm sure some of you have already started working with it, but I just did, and I love it. One of the great things about React hooks is that it allows us to have lifecycle methods without actually making it into a class. So before, if you had to just have like one thing on there, say you have a functional component, and you want to have a component did mount on there just to change or fetch something from API. Before, you have to change your small function component into a larger class-based component. Start using this, start using everything else with your render. Now we can actually make our components a lot more modular and reusable. And let's be honest, no one wants to really write the same code twice, because that's awful. A whole full applause there. So like, why should we use them? One thing that's really awesome is that React doesn't really offer a way to attach reuse behavior to a component, or to a class-based component. Like, one of the ways that we've been going around this is actually have like higher order functions that are passing props down to the children components. And having to, this actually leads to something called like wrapper hell. Wrapper hell is like basically just kind of keep on passing things around. It's just like, okay, now I need this, I want to reuse this class-based component, or I want to use this component here, and I'm having to rewrite my code again so I can actually pass in this prop differently, or pass in another prop. Now, also, one of the things is that complex components can be really hard to understand, especially if you're going into it like you haven't, maybe you haven't like written the code base before. You are just going into something else that someone else has written, and you have to just dig through their code, saying, "What the fuck is this?" This can be like just really confusing. So. I know like I've started off just kind of making like push components and getting to a point where I need to have something saved in state. Say like I started building a simple component with like a color picker thing, and that color picker at first just had something saved into it, just like pushed down from the parent component, and that was it. Now all of a sudden I need to add something into that component and say like, okay, I need to make sure, is this thing locked first? Now I need to rewrite this whole component, which I originally wrote as just a real basic functional component, and have it as a class-based. Also awful. And now that classes can also be really confusing just for having, essentially coming into React and just learning it for the first time. Knowing when to use this and when to actually be able to bind this, it can be something that's kind of a big barrier for someone learning React. And just for everyone else, I'm sure. Now, actually using hooks, you can actually eliminate passing props in renders, and actually you can use it for your global store without actually having the hassle of setting up Redux. This is obviously for specific use cases. You don't want to always get rid of Redux, and always want to just use hooks. But that's just a nice thing to use for it later. Another thing is that React hooks are completely backwards compatible. So that means that if you want to just write some components and just use hooks on there, you don't have to completely get rid of Redux. You don't have to just use React hooks. You can pick and choose, basically, as long as you're using React version 16.8, I believe it is. Now, since we're not using classes or constructors or this, we actually need a new way to add and manage state inside our components. Now, with React hooks, there's something that they give us called use state. Using state is takes in actually a single argument, which is the initial value for the state, and then it actually returns an array of objects here for the variable to actually read the state and the function to write the state if you want to update it later on. So like in this example, we actually see that we're creating a new function with the useState hook. We have an array where we're declaring the variable count, which will actually use as the initial state, and setCount, which will be the function to write the new state. And then actually in our return statement, we're using that function to declare it to update the state on click. So, real basic, a lot easier than trying to go through and actually recreate a constructor and super, and setting up this on each one of them. Another really good one is actually useEffect. UseEffect can be used for, it's actually like the React hook version of actually using Lifecycle Methods. So, think about when you've used Lifecycle Methods in the past, It's usually for like synchronization of your components. Say you want to make sure that when a component did mount, it's going to fetch from a certain API. If it's a component did update, you make sure that whatever is passed down is actually going to reflect on the DOM. With actually use effect, you can now perform side effects on the DOM and without actually having to have a component did mount or component did update. Next thing with that is that it just takes in two arguments, function and with an optional array. So if you have like if you don't have the optional array in there, it works just like component did mount. So it loads up and it says this is what's going to be happening. Right? Trying to have better examples here. But then if you have like the second argument of the array, you can have like array of variables and you can have it run like a component did update. And it'll only change when certain values are actually updated. Use context. Use context, we can use to just like pass real simple data between components without using Redux or doing prop drilling. So say like you had just a completely just React thing, and you want to pass down something from the uppermost state and pass it down 3 or 4 levels down. Normally you'd either have to like use prop drilling and just keep on sending it down through each component and until you get to the one you want to use it. But that gets really messy. No way to do it would to actually start implementing Redux. With Redux, then you can have it as your global store and have it just have your single source of truth from Redux. Now, once you've actually created the context, you can see we're doing that there just by the last one. For React.create context, that themes. Then we can actually have that context down wherever you provide it and have it multiple layers deep on there without passing it down from each function to the next. So now like in the actual grandchild here of the theme button, we're grabbing the theme back from app. I was using theme.use context with the theme context. And we can actually use everything inside of it without having to prop drill. Along with use effect and use state, React hooks now allows for using like kind of making custom hooks. So you can have like your global state for everything, also without using use context. So using these ones, it's basically actually even easier. So you can actually have your hook, your hook set up just like you would with Redux store, except for without having different reducers, different actions, different everything else like that. You just have one single file which uses your real basic Redux hooks. The way this kind of works is, well, actually I found this really nice diagram online. Did not make this, but fella, okay, what's it? Cool. Yeah, so you just have your set state function, and you're actually going to cycle through them, and all these components which use your custom hook, can now have that same state and be reflected on each one, allowing for more synchronization. Yeah, so like here, we'd actually be creating a new file called like just global store.js, or whatever you want to call it really, for making your custom components. So you can actually set up your set state function with your new state and your listeners array for each listener, and to update the state on all of your components that are listening further down the line. So say that you have listeners set up on 3 different components. You can have it just update that one, and then it'll update all the different components which are using that custom hook later on down there. Now we can also import our use custom hook, use across Amber components to keep synchronization, and just having that single source of truth again. So we have our use custom right here, our global state and set global state, and access this on Amber components, and it's always going to return back to the same single source of truth, which is our global store.js file, or our use custom hook. So you don't use hook, you use Redux, which is fantastic, because I hate Redux. Just kind of overview of what kind of river is just the use state hooks, which just replace your need for holding state and your components, and you don't have to use this. Use effect, which can be used instead of like lifecycle methods, custom hooks, and use context. Now there's a bunch of different additional hooks that React has up there as far as like also different edge cases, saying you need to just get one specific thing out there. And I'm not going to go into it because there's a lot of different information on this, but I definitely recommend if you guys are interested, just take a picture of this or go to the ReactJS.org org documents, and you can go into a lot deeper dive onto React hooks. Another thing that actually just came out is React router hooks. React router hooks, I'm also not going to deep dive into this, but just kind of give you a real basic example of each one of these. Use params, you can use it through a React router thing to give you access to the params of a particular route. Use location hook returns the location object, which contains the path, name, search, hash key, and the state properties for the current location. Use history, and that actually gives access to the history object, which helps us navigate or change routes. And the use route match, which gives us the way to access the match object if you have a route that's not inside the switch. Sorry, that was a little faster than I thought it was going to be, but questions?
Can you go back to that array of listeners and why that's considered global versus just having a custom hook for each of the listeners that can be reused? I didn't quite understand what that was getting at.
Yeah, so it's very small on the screen.
This, yeah.
Right. So I'm sorry, what's your question?
The question, like, why have an array of listeners that you push to versus having like a custom hook for each of the listeners? I don't quite understand why you would do this and why this is considered like global. You're using the term global. I didn't quite understand the connection.
Okay, so the listeners is basically just for each of your different like local components that are going to be hooked up to your like use state or like your use custom hook. So that's why it'll actually go through and update all of those that are on whenever you set the state. Does that answer your question? Or?
Perhaps a little more time.
Let me take a crack at it, because
Go for it.
yeah, so that might go soon.
It's like a key listener or something like that, maybe is what you're saying.
Yeah. So I is this on? Oh, now it's decent. Okay. Okay. So what? Hang on. I'm a person that rarely needs a microphone, so okay, so what's happening here is whenever this gets imported, this listeners array gets created, right? So it's empty. Then the first time you use the hook, it's adding a listener into this array. So if you have 3 different components, you use this hook 3 different times, you now have 3 things in here that are listening to the state. Then once you update that state in any of those, it would bubble it up and bubble it back down. You can also do this by just setting state in a provider in a context and then passing that down.
Yes. Anyone else?
I just wanted to ask that on use effect, that second parameter is what keeps you from unwittingly spamming an API, correct?
Empty arrays, yes.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, the dependency array.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, thank you much for coming to talk.
Cool.
Big ups to the guys here who've been running this meetup for as long as I've been down here, like 4 or 5 months. Saul, Tori, all those guys, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Awesome. I graduated from a boot camp, and no way in hell would I be giving a talk like 4 weeks after graduating. So, give another round of applause to Pat. Anyway, well, thank you all for coming. It's been a great night. Hope you learned something. Feel free to mingle for a little bit if you want, but that is everything. So, have a great evening. See ya.
Okay, get it done.